Hello, everybody. Welcome to the stream. Thank you all for coming out tonight. We have Enrique Rodriguez here going to give a talk about software engineering in the video games industry. He currently works at BossFight Entertainment. He mentors incoming software developers at the company, and he is a recent ATech graduate. So we're really excited to have him on tonight. And yeah, quick announcement before we begin. I just wanted to say that tonight is the last night that we are going to have t-shirt orders up. So if you have not yet placed your order for that, you definitely want to get that in as quickly as you can. Orders will be closing down at midnight tonight. So we should be having an announcement made from our treasurer here really soon. Providing links on order placement and everything. We are accepting payment via PayPal, Venmo, or Google Pay. It's $15 per shirt. If you are remote and far from campus or anything, your $15 does include shipping. So there's no like extra fee for that. And you got 5 cool colors to choose from. So if you're interested in a shirt, it'll help support the club a little bit while getting you some cool merch to wear. And then, yeah, next week we will be having an Intro to Unity workshop. Our Vice President, Andrew Sylvester, is going to be leading that. So if you are like at all new to game development or anything and you just need to learn a program on how to build a game for yourself, we can get you started using Unity. Andrew is pretty great at it. So yeah, that'll be hosted on our Discord. The link is on screen. I know a lot of you guys are already on our Discord, so yeah, join us there next Wednesday at 7 if you are interested in learning Unity. And with that said, I will hand it on over to Enrique for the talk.
Looks like I'm on. All right, cool. All right, hey, how's it going, guys? This is my presentation behind the curtain. I'm Enrique Rodriguez, and this is going to be trying to take a, I guess, behind-the-scenes peek at the journey from being an ATech major, as much of you guys are, or a student, and transitioning into the industry. So, who am I? Well, the name's kind of evident, hopefully, and I'd like to say right now I am an ATech alumni, relatively recent, roughly a year and a half out at this point. ATech major, computer science minor. I was a junior, I am a junior. I am a junior software developer at BossFight Entertainment right now. I worked on 2 unannounced projects so far, and I am currently mentoring incoming software developers. So I think I've done pretty well for myself so far. And to give you guys a better idea, I want to show off some of the career highlights thus far. So one of my favorite systems was coincidentally one of the first systems that I created whenever I started at BossFight, which is a debug menu system. It was a really cool abstract interface that's able to quickly latch itself onto any game and create a lot of the debug capabilities that you would generally want from a debug menu. And it takes away all of the overhead, especially whenever we would be trying to start up a new project and there's just a lot of problems from the QA side of things and for development and things at large. The debug menu system really has helped them, and really, since it was the first project I made, gave them a great first impression. So really proud of that. Outside of that, I created some tools just to help with development at large again. These are going to be more of the Unity editor tools that your everyday game designers and artists will be using. They're incredibly powerful, I guess. If you do them right, you start solving the problems that problems are creating, I guess, and then you'll be able to see overall efficiency rather than just trying to solve the direct problem that you're trying to solve. And I can expand on that a little bit later. I also have worked a ton with UI UX. I have got quite a bit of experience, especially working in a mobile development studio. UI UX is the bread and butter of that field, I guess. You can't really interact with a mobile game if it doesn't have good and smooth UI UX. So it used to be a weak I guess, a weak point whenever I first started in the industry. But after taking a nosedive and really digging deep into Unity's UI system, there's really a lot of opportunities for improvement and optimizations, and it's very easy to sneak in and have really slow dialogue systems that could really just be detrimental to the player experience. So that one's been really cool and just an ongoing thing so far. I've gotten the opportunity to work on telemetry. Yeah, so telemetry is a pretty cool one because I didn't think I'd be able to work on it so early in my career. That's really the like lifeline for data analysts and project managers. Telemetry is all of the information that players give out, I guess, whenever they play a game. You'd be able to see all of the statistics on pretty much anything you could think of, and that's been implemented on some of the projects by me. So that was really cool to be able to expose myself to all the different types of systems, what project managers are looking for, how they are trying to drive players to do certain things and hit certain metrics and so on and so forth, to be able to deem the game successful. So if you don't have good telemetry implementation, you're really going to sell yourself short, and you're not going to end up getting accurate information, and you're not going to be able to construct correct analysis of the gameplay so far. So that's been incredibly helpful. One of the biggest accomplishments I say is learning the in-house language that BossFight has. It's not something that a lot of developers really want to dip their toes in because since BossFight isn't really the biggest corporation, they don't have all of the tools to be able to make the in-house language incredibly robust as maybe a company like, I don't know, Blizzard would do or something. So this would mean that there's a lot of manual overhead and having to make sure that everything is done correctly. There's not that many typos because there's not an IDE to help support anything. There's a lot of implicit rules that you'll have to memorize and things like that. So it was really a big turnoff for a lot of engineers, but I saw it as an opportunity to be able to learn a lot. And that's exactly what happened. I ended up being taken under the wing by one of the principal engineers at BossFight and really learned a whole bunch just by seeing how he constructed this language and the utility that it provided. And with that understanding, I've been able to apply that and really just, I'd say, accelerate my experience so far. So that's been a godsend. Another great opportunity I've been able to partake is creating a Fatui. That's really, really not really something you would expect within a year and a half of development so far. I've been told it's kind of the benchmark of actually becoming legitimized into the industry, I guess, at least through BossFight's eyes. I think, was there an error with the stream? No, okay, sorry. I guess it just cut out of my. Yeah, so the Fatui is the first-time user experience. It's generally the first thing that any player will touch, and it is the most pivotal piece, so they don't generally give this responsibility out lightly. I've been lucky enough to be able to work on one already, and potentially even two on the other project I'm working on now. And it gives you an idea of how little time you have to make an impact and teach all of the key moments. So everything has to be incredibly crisp. There cannot be any issues. And because it's a system that's trying to support the underlying changes and everything going on the back end as you're trying to develop a game, it can be incredibly volatile, and it's really hard to be able to continuously maintain that. So that was a really interesting experience. Definitely fun, though. I would say definitely a highlight of my career to be able to help use all the things that I learned building up to that telemetry, in-house language, to be able to help create the Fatui and create something that was really cool. And hopefully one day you guys can see that, but to be determined. Gameplay, yeah. So gameplay engineering generally isn't something that they just kind of kick you into. But I have gotten the opportunity to work on some of that. Nothing too crazy, I'd say. It's been kind of a mixed bag, and I've gotten quite a bit of exposure. The gameplay stuff is interesting at times, but I found some of the other systems more rewarding and more entertaining on my end. Sound was actually really cool. I got the opportunity to work with a really talented sound producer, designer at BossFight. That's worked on other AAA games, so that's really awesome to be able to see work with somebody that has worked on things that I idolized as a kid, and have a good relationship with him. Try to see how I can improve their current systems, and yeah, it's been a great experience so far, and I love having a good, well-polished, sound-made game. Anyways, so now that you guys got an idea of what my career has looked like so far, I wanted to kind of give you guys an idea of who I was. And I think it's relatively easy to be able to show off some of the highlights of where I was, and really make myself seem a lot, I guess, more unattainable than I otherwise would want to. I was like an associate manager throughout college, so that was nice. I got some great work experience in doing that. I got an IT internship for like 2 years, and I had some cool achievements, being co-lead of Game Lab for 2 semesters, and I was able to integrate machine learning agents into a game for my capstone. And all those things are cool and fine and dandy and all, but I think one of the biggest things I wanted to do with this presentation, and one of the biggest takeaways I wanted to have, is for you guys to be able to understand that it's not all glamour all the time. It's sometimes really hard, and some of these people that you idolize in the industry, they made their share of mistakes too. I'm not saying I am a person to be idolized right now. I realize that my career is still pretty young, but I wanted to try to humanize myself, and in turn, hopefully humanize some of these other expectations that a lot of people hold, because I understand that whenever I was a student, I really felt like that bar was really far away, and I didn't know if I could ever reach that. To kind of give you guys some examples, I initially started off and I lost my AES scholarship. That really sucked. And so because I lost my scholarship, I had to work my way through college. And that sucked even more, because then I had to now put on 20, 40 hours a week, sometimes more depending on the week, to be able to keep a good amount of income. And that just wasn't a fun experience. It really just drained me and didn't really want to make me want to push myself academically. So much so that after a point, I was messing up in some classes. I wasn't taking some stuff seriously. And so I had a serious talk with myself, and I had to say, I'm going to leave college for a semester, and I want to make sure that if I come back, it's going to be all hands on deck, and I'm going to make sure that I'm going to succeed moving forward. I had to make sure that I wasn't just blowing through college just to go to college, but I wanted to go to college for the right reasons. So I took that semester off, and I think I came back in a much more defined capacity, and it was much stronger Enrique than I was before. So I want to share with you guys some of the things that I did to be able to succeed, because it's okay to realize that you are in this position, but now what do you do in order to overcome the faults that you've already made? So the recipes for success. I think one of the primary things, and bar none, one of the most important things that I could contribute to, I guess, my redemption arc would be community, by far. I had some friends that were going to college, obviously, before I left that semester. And whenever I came back, I felt like I wasn't going to have them anymore. I felt like I was losing out on that sense of community that I had built, and that felt bad. I felt like I wasn't going to be able to keep up with them. And to come back and have those same friends extend a helping hand and ask me to work on their games, and to just ask me to sit next to them during class or anything like that, that felt great. It made me want to push myself further. And I started surrounding myself with these great developers that were also pushing themselves. And that made me want to be better. So the community aspect made it so much easier to do everything else on this list. It's going to make it easier for you to be able to get up on a Saturday and actually work, because, hey, your friends are doing it. It's not that bad. You kind of do it with a sense of community. And maybe even just go to class early in the morning because you get to hang out with friends or something, right? Community was absolutely pivotal for me just being able to get back on the right track. Secondly, introspection. So introspection is something that can be potentially swapped out for feedback. Introspection is really just looking at your actions and seeing how you could improve based off of the scenario, right? And I'd like to say I'm very introspective. And if I see that something went wrong, I try to dissect why it went wrong. And then I try to dissect what I did and how I could further improve in a scenario like that in the future. It's very easy to be able to put the blame on other people, and that's fine. Sometimes it is their fault, but what can you control in that situation? Could you have potentially, I don't know, woken up earlier? So maybe that jackass driving in traffic that's going 40 miles an hour on the freeway or something like that, he didn't really cause you to be late. It was you not waking up on time, right? So that type of introspection has been very helpful, and it has allowed me to not only just improve myself as a person, but improve in everyday coding. Like if I go through and in my first few examples with BossFight, I would go through and get some peer reviews where another more senior engineer would come in and take a look at my code and the systems that I've made, and they'd be able to kind of like dissect it and give me some feedback. That's great. But on top of that, what could I have done to be able to potentially present that better or just improve the system on top of whatever they're saying, right? So absolutely key to always look at yourself before you start criticizing others. And introspection, absolutely one of my key traits I would push for. Momentum. So momentum's a interesting one. I couldn't think of the exact word, or I didn't want to have like a whole bunch of bullet points, but momentum feels like it combines a whole bunch of key factors here, or ingredients if we're going with recipe. Momentum is a combination of starting, doing whatever you can to keep going, and doing whatever you can to stop yourself from slowing down. So you want to just get started as soon as possible, right? If you're one of the hardest parts of any project has always been just starting, and followed by just finishing, but that's a different thing. Just starting is like by far I've seen the number one culprit of people just not doing things. It's not actually doing the stuff and the small hurdles that you overcome whenever you're actually in the process of making something or in the process of doing whatever. It's starting. It's that first step. It's getting yourself on the treadmill per se and starting that machine, or waking yourself up in the morning and going to the gym or whatever it may be. And some of the other things to emphasize in that are to do whatever you can to keep yourself going. There's a lot of, I'd like to say this one would be reducing the friction that you have in stopping you from doing whatever you're doing. If your goal is to, I don't know, program something every day or something, one, you just want to start, right? That's the first part of this. And then second, you want to try to make that as easy as possible. Maybe you make it so your IDE or Unity Hub or something just turns on start. So you don't have to think about, I got to go type it into start menu or whatever it is. I got to do all these things, these small things that just make you have to make a decision, remove those from your life and just make it easier for you to just do the thing you're trying to do. And kind of the other side of that coin would be doing whatever you can to stop yourself from slowing down. So if you know that you like to play, let's say in this hypothetical that where you want to program something every day, if you know that you like playing games a lot, so maybe instead of having games on one account on your computer, you have games on another account on your computer, and then you're able to keep that momentum much easier because you're reducing the friction that it's taking to be able to program something. And on top of that, you're making it harder for the friction to appear in your life to be able to keep that momentum going. And stopping is difficult once you kind of get on this momentum train, but I'd much rather have that problem than not being able to start or constantly having to start over again, because I find that to be much harder. The biggest one is definitely determination. I think if you don't have an idea of where you want to go, you're not going to get there. If you don't want to be a developer, you just want to, actually, if you don't want anything, if you're just doing things because people are telling you to do things, I think you need to take a look at what you're actually going for and strive towards that. One of the reasons that I came back from that one semester break was because I wanted to make cool games. I wanted to make some cool shit, some stuff that I could do with some team members, some friends, whatever it may be, that could inspire the next generation. I look back at how I was inspired to be a game developer, and that was through all of the great memories that a lot of these games provided for me. And I don't think I would want, I guess, my future self to look back and say that I missed out on that opportunity. So whenever I came back, I made sure I was completely determined that I'm going to graduate, I'm going to make some cool products, and I'm going to work in the industry. I didn't think I'd be as lucky as I have been, but I did get that goal set in my mind, and nothing was shifting me away from that. One way or another, I was going to be a developer, and I was going to make games that people would consume and like have fun with and everything. It's just a matter of time. So, final thing, luck. I mentioned luck in mine. I think luck is kind of a consequence of all of these things. If you surround yourself with the proper community, if you have proper introspection consistently, if you're consistently at a high momentum and nothing's really stopping you, and if you have this consistent determination, you're going to get what you want. It's just really a matter of time. Maybe your break isn't as soon as some other people's or whatever it may be, but the community is going to help you. If you're a good person, you're going to end up having a good reputation, and that reputation is going to carry itself, and your work ethic is going to carry itself. The introspection is going to make it so you're just better at what you're doing, so you're going to be consistently improving. The momentum is going to make it so you're just constantly doing things, and if you're constantly doing things, eventually you're going to strike gold. And the determination is going to make it so you just continue doing all of these things. You don't turn off the engine, and you just keep going, and you will succeed. I promise you. So now that you guys kind of have an idea of what my road was to getting the internship, once I got the opportunity to work at BossFight, I did start off as an intern. Well, now once you start off at any job, it doesn't necessarily need to be an intern. It could be a contract position, or it could be just starting off first week on the job or whatever it may be. How do you end up going to being in their good graces? And that's what I kind of wanted to outline, because I'd like to think that I've done a pretty good job. I don't think I would be offered the opportunity to mentor software developers that have been coming in if I haven't been doing well. So I wanted to try to share some of that information to you guys. Timeliness. It's a small thing. It's probably the easiest thing that you can do. Just be there early, be there on time. I thought this was just a me thing. I thought nobody would notice this. Timeliness is something that I want to make sure was executed to the fullest extent every single day. There was not a single day where I was late. And on the one chance where something happened, I made sure I contacted my, I guess, higher up or supervisor at that time. And they knew exactly what was going on if, I don't know, some emergency came up and I wasn't necessarily going to be there that morning or something like that. But being there 20, 50, 30 minutes early, whatever it is, was absolutely key for me. And that was really hard because I had to commute roughly an hour every day. And in the mornings, the traffic would sometimes build up. So I would end up being proactive and making sure that I woke up even earlier to beat the traffic. And I just kind of made myself busy in that area in the morning. And I made sure to always be on time, because someone's going to notice that. Someone's going to see that you're always the first one in, that you're always going to be ahead of everybody mentally because you've gotten more time to prepare. If you're there 15 minutes early, you have the, I guess, presence of mind to start the day because you have a nice 10, 15 minutes, whatever it is, to think about everything you're about to do. And then you have a better plan of action. And that plan of action is going to manifest itself easier because you were just on time. It's so simple. Just wake up a little bit earlier, or you just get there a bit sooner, whatever it may be. My trick was to always lie to myself. If I said it takes, I don't know, if it takes an hour to get there, then I would say it takes an hour and 15 minutes to get there. I need to leave an hour and 15 minutes before this starts or something. And if I had to account for traffic, then I'd say half an hour just to make sure there's no issues and I'm there on time. And they're not going to know me as the guy that's being there late and not respecting their time. The other thing, socializing. I would think this one's kind of obvious, but whenever you get that opportunity as an intern, I noticed, because I was lucky enough to work with a few other interns, that socializing isn't that natural. Like, they were afraid to approach some people because they didn't want to, distract them or make them feel like they were being bothered or something along those lines. And part of it is depending on how you approach them and everything. I mean, you have to be nice. You don't want to just demand their attention or something. But I always saw it as, and this goes really well with timeliness, if you catch somebody and they're getting some coffee or something, or maybe they're just grabbing a snack, depending on how your work environment is set up, it's a quick way to be able to just chat with them. Hey, how's it going? I don't know if I've introduced myself yet. For example, for me, I'm Enrique. What are you working? I'm one of the new interns here. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself? You know, just kind of some small icebreakers, talk about, I don't know, the weather, the project, whatever it may be. And by the end of it, if you do this consistently, if you're in a couple months intern or a couple weeks intern, I made it my goal to know everybody's name in the company. And at the time, that was like 60, 70 people or so, at least in the Allen office. So by the end of it, a lot of people will know your name, and the familiarity will make it so it's a lot easier to just be accustomed to seeing you as a full-time employee, or just easy, or they want to work with you more. They want to see more of you. That's a nice guy. Yeah, definitely. You know, he, I don't know, knows about my 2 dogs or something. So socializing is absolutely key. It's going to open up some other doors potentially too. I'm not saying to use socializing just for your social or for your networking benefits, but it's also great to talk to some of these people. You're talking to some of the people that have made some of the games that you guys probably already played, and that's awesome. Like, these are people with experience. They are also just normal people, just like I am, and it's part of the reason why I'm making this entire presentation. Socializing is so pivotal. You'll be able to just like open so many doors by doing that. I'll get to something regarding this a little bit later in the presentation. Being fearless. So starting off as an intern, I made sure that I threw myself into anything they threw my way. If they had some sort of task which felt impossible, like the debug menu system, since we were partnered with other interns, my partner didn't think it was feasible. It was like 3 months. We got to create this super robust debug menu for this incredibly large project, bigger than anything we have ever worked on by far, with these like top end, super like intimidating, impressive engineers overlooking us. It felt like a lot, but I felt confident that we could do it. And maybe we were going to take a bit longer than what they had originally anticipated, but that's because what they were outlining was a lot more difficult. What they were outlining was a lot different than what they were expecting, and that expectation was a lot more difficult to achieve, and that comes to good communication. So communication is absolutely key to anything in life, honestly, but it's definitely going to set you apart, I'd say, if you have excellent communication, if you're constantly keeping people informed, if you're asking questions, if you are communicating your problems effectively, if you are, even the timeliest example, if you are telling your supervisor, hey, my car just broke down or something, I'm going to need to borrow my friend's car or something for the day. It can take me like half an hour or something like that. That extra communication is so much better than 30 minutes late. You're like, I'm sorry, I had to borrow my friend's car. So that I guess, proactiveness also comes into hand there. But the communication is so pivotal. I can't even really fully explain it within this conversation. Like, even talking to a producer is one of the big things once you're actually, well, heck, even in Game Lab, you guys have producers that you guys have to keep in the loop on everything. Telling people your situation or trying to go to the person that you know can solve your problem better, but maybe you don't want to bother them. Well, if you are thinking about what your question is going to be and making it concise and knowing what you want to get from those answers, then you're going to end up having a much better time. And then back to the whole producer thing, if you tell your producer that, let's say in the example of the debug menu, if you tell your producer, hey, we can make this, but it's going to actually end up taking twice as long as you guys were expecting because of these reasons, that good communication is going to make you seem like a better worker, because now you have proper estimates and you're not just making excuses on why you're not doing something. You're actually providing tangible evidence on why these things can't be done, or at least why you can't do them right now. And they're not going to hate you because you can't do them right now. Obviously, you're in the position to do the job because somebody found you capable to do that job. So it's really just about making sure everybody's on the same page and expectations aren't swayed, I guess, or they aren't just set sky high because you aren't properly communicating something. So communication is going to help temper all of that and really make it so you shine as a professional. Improvement. So this is definitely more along the lines of being an intern. You want to show that you've improved. You want to show that you can learn. You want to show that you're open-minded. You want to show that from the get-go, you are the sharpest knife in a drawer. They want to see that you started day one and, okay, maybe you were a bit green, but by like a month, 2 months, or however long the internship opportunity is, that you have gotten this far based off of this much guidance, that shows really well. It's like, okay, well, this person can learn. This person knows how to improve themselves. They know how to improve their code. They know how to improve whatever it may be. And that's something that I want to invest in now. Because whenever you're on the company side of things and you're looking at an intern, it's a potential employee. It's someone that you could definitely consider working for your company long term, but you have to see these features in them, right? Are they taking the job seriously? Are they able to be a culture fit with the socializing aspect? Are they willing to make mistakes and jump into the heat of things? Are they properly communicating and making sure that producers know what's going on or their leads know what's going on? And above all else, are they getting better? Is this going to be an investment that's going to return, and I guess return a profit, to be a bit more cynical about it. But yeah. So some tips. You guys have sat through, I guess, my rant on being an intern salary, kind of my road to success. Now I want to just give some general tips on actually working in the industry and go from here. So some of these are going to be kind of obvious, like mastering your language. I wasn't necessarily the best whenever I first started at BossFight as an intern at C#. I thought I was intermediate to advanced, but I saw a lot of things that I had never seen before whenever I first ran into their code base, and so that was incredibly intimidating to me. So I was having to play catch up outside of work or during work to be able to learn some of these unique things that they're doing in C#, while at the same time trying to achieve my goal of having to create that debug menu, right? So it made it very difficult for me to try to learn and also apply it at the same time. And it was almost like putting the cart before the horse. So mastering your language will not only make it easier to be able to get one of these entry-level jobs, but also be able to keep that entry-level job and expand it into the future. And knowing the ins and outs of C# or C++ or whatever language you're going to specify it is the most important thing you can do as a software developer, followed by knowing the engine. So in my case, I know Unity very well now, and I would say every engineer knows Unity pretty well. But I will say, I think I had a better understanding of Unity than even some of the engineers whenever I first started going there. Like, I knew all sorts of tips and tricks. I knew exactly how to navigate it in an efficient manner. I knew how to customize my workflow exactly the way I wanted it. So it made it so I was really comfortable. And maybe even if you show something to someone that's a bit more senior, that bodes well for you. That's going to be impressive. This new person just taught me something that's pretty cool. Not do it in a friendly manner. You don't want to just show up and pretend you're hot shit. That's not going to go well for you. But this mastery is going to make you look very well in their eyes, as well as it's just going to make your job so much easier. There's already so many things to learn. These new pipelines, this new architecture, whatever it may be. Knowing these two things are going to be, those things are your bread and butter because they're never going to change. You're always going to need that language. And okay, maybe the engine changes depending on where you go. But for the most part, they all use a very similar structure. So one of the big tips I would give would be just looking at different architecture. There is all sorts of competing architecture out there, and it's going to vary depending on where you go, what they're going to be using at the time. And maybe they see that, I don't know, the MVVM pattern is the best right now or something like that. And it would have helped if you would have known the MVVM pattern by now, or the MVC pattern, or something like that, right? So these type of things are very helpful. And they allow you to be able to reduce that startup time, increasing the whole momentum thing that I was talking about a few slides back, and just making it easier for you to be able to assimilate into their workflow. The easier you assimilate into their workflow, the easier your life's going to be, and the more production you're going to have. And the more production you're going to have, the better you're just going to look and just feel overall. Writing clean code. Oh boy. So this is something that's, I guess, relatively new. I'm not exactly sure, but I've seen some more grizzled veterans, I guess, not necessarily write the cleanest code. And it's not really a knock on them. They're genius people. They know their language inside and out, know the engine like the back of their hand. But writing clean code has been something that I really harped on from the get-go since college. And I constantly improve on that. That's not to say that my code is the cleanest thing ever, but constantly keeping that in mind, in the same way on how a game designer keeps their player in mind whenever they're designing a system, because that's going to be the person interfacing with their design. A programmer should keep their code clean, because the people that are going to be interfacing with their code are either other engineers or yourself in the future. And that code is 80% maintenance and 20% actual changing and adding to, because for the most part, there's going to be a whole bunch of bugs. There's going to be, okay, hey, this system isn't working the way that it was originally intended. Okay, well, let me figure out what's going on. And if you start seeing really weird variable names, or if you see something like, I don't know, VL or something like that, okay, does that mean velocity, or what exactly does that mean? Like, what is this ambiguity? And if you end up just writing clean code from the get-go, it's going to make it a lot easier for you to remind yourself what you're looking at, as well as introduce the code over to new engineers that may be taking over your system. And it's going to be a huge plus whenever you talk to other engineers. They're going to like you a lot more if you end up writing some nice code. If you end up writing some really shitty code, it's going to be really hard to maintain. Nobody's going to want to mess with your system. It's going to be something that's unsustainable, and they may just have to rip out entirely, because the time it takes to read through that code is just not worth the time it's going to take to fix up that code, for example. And we've had situations like that. That kind of sucks. So putting a good emphasis on that and understanding how to do that was always one of my number one priorities, and I encourage everyone else to do something similar. And also made me a cool friend at BossFight that also really liked clean code, so we paired together pretty well, and introduced me to quite a few different things. Anyway, experimenting with features. This is something that I also did in college, and I recommend to do just kind of on a regular basis. It's going to show you a lot of what Unity has in store for everybody else, I guess, in a couple months or a couple years, depending on what their development cycle looks like. You may be able to do things like, for example, I did ML agents, and that was incredibly cool for my capstone. It was something that had some very old documentation in some regards, and not a lot of support. So it was really difficult to be able to go through all the documentation. I learned a whole bunch of random things. I saw a whole bunch of words I didn't understand. I went through and I kind of got an idea of how it worked, and then I just kept on messing with it and tinkering with it until finally it started doing what I wanted to. And then by the end of it, I think I had a pretty good, I wouldn't say mastery, but a pretty good understanding and enough fluency in it to be able to talk to it to a good degree. And because of that, if, let's say, for example, the HDRP or the lightweight render pipeline, this would be a better example. So that recently came out for Unity, if you guys didn't know, and that was an experimental feature, I believe a year, maybe a little bit more ago. So I was one of the first people to take a look at that at the company, because we were trying to check out if it was feasible for our project at the time to be able to transfer over to that system, and would it be more efficient. And once I started digging into everything, and not only did I learn a whole bunch, I ended up seeing how the feature was going to shape itself out. And that means I was ahead of the curve. Whenever the feature actually did come out, I understood a lot more of it. So this kind of put me, I guess, ahead of everybody else in terms of the lightweight render pipeline, which is really nice, or at least everybody else in the company. So then if there was a question regarding that, I could quickly answer that, or at least more quickly answer that, since I already had an understanding of these experimental features. And the other thing that this provides is it's going to give you a lot of confidence. If you could end up going through and messing with an experimental feature and making something of it, something that's not really fully polished by Unity yet, but you managed to, I guess, get your way through it and make something cool, it's going to feel really nice. These are things that are going to be the cutting edge of technology. So if you're working on it now in college, people are going to be looking for that. If you're already in a job and maybe you're applying for a different job or something like that, these are new features. Like I remember interviewing somebody that has worked with the, I believe it's called the Unity Dots system or Dot system, which is their like burst compiler that they use that really helped speed things along. So that was really cool. Like that was, I think, an experimental feature whenever they mess with it. And now they're able to use it in good practice and help improve the speed of the projects that they're working on. And that's a good appeal. You want to see people that have interest in programming, even if the actual features themselves aren't fully fleshed out, because that also shows that they're a bit fearless when it comes to new software and new programs and all of these things. So really big tip. Learning how to learn. I think this is something that ATEC taught me above all else, which is learning how I felt comfortable learning. And for everybody, it varies to some degree. I really like having some condensed information just thrown my way in the form of, like, I don't know, a video, or for example, like Brackeys is a great utility. Well, yeah. Anyways, he recently retired, so sad to see that, but he was great whenever he made his videos. But he provided some really great condensed information and allowed you to be able to get a great starting point on any new feature that you would be trying to mess with. And that was really great for me because I wanted to get a foundation of everything. This is particularly useful whenever you're going to be, well, at least at BossFight, and I'm sure at other smaller studios, you're going to be shifting around from system to system. And I'm assuming even at larger studios, you'd be shifting eventually from one system to another system. And reducing that startup time is incredibly useful. So learning how to learn a system is another thing. So I don't necessarily have the luxury of watching a video on a system that hasn't even been released yet. So I learned very quickly how to be able to learn these new features or these new systems that I would now be taking ownership of. If I had to talk to a designer, if it was just kind of a theoretical system, then I would talk to a designer immediately and make sure I had everything ironed out through proper communication. And as soon as we were on the same page, I had a better idea and I felt more confident now hitting the code. Whenever I get thrown into a new system, and if it's already in the game and I'm just kind of sustaining that, then I would try to experiment with that system thoroughly, try to see the limitations of it, see where there are already issues, and I can even be proactive in pointing out to the producer, like, it looks like this thing is kind of shaky, and then I could reinforce that with proper evidence whenever I go dig into the code. So I kind of have a system, I guess, lined up for those type of situations. Really understanding it first, and then taking a deep dive in the code and understanding how the backend works, and then from there, communicating any proper expectations, because that is one thing you will I don't know if I listed it here, but it is one thing that is very, very important as a software engineer. Having great estimates is going to be a lifesaver. That was definitely something I had to learn the hard way, and it's going to be something that your producers will love you for if you have great estimates. One final tip, don't forget the passion. So it's very easy, I feel like, to get bogged down in the day-to-day monotony of being a developer, which is like, I gotta program something and it just feels like a chore sometimes, and it's like, it's just another job. But I always try to catch myself whenever I start slipping down this slope, because you're making some cool shit. You're making some games, man. Like, this is fun. This is what, in my mind, I always dreamed of. I wanted to be the game developer that, like, helped create these really cool games and help share these with the world. Like, that's awesome. Like, now I get to work with some people that have been working on, like, Age of Mythology and stuff like that, games that I played as a kid that I'll never forget, like some amazing titles. And now I'll be able to create that. Somebody one day will play the game that I helped make, and they'll look at that and they'll be like, wow, that was a really fun game. I don't know, maybe that's what sparked them to start making game development or something and passing that forward. And that's awesome. And I find it just kind of weird to see that whenever, through my time at BossFight, I should say, I've seen so many people just kind of forget about that and get a bit cynical and like get tied down in the bureaucracy of like being in a studio and everything. And it's easy to do for sure, especially since a lot of the day you don't necessarily look at the game. You look at the code behind it, or you sit in meetings with people that aren't the game. They're just talking about the game. So then it just feels like you're just doing boring things, but you can't forget why you're doing it. And if you keep that, I guess, going back a few slides, if you keep that determination and just like looking at what you want to be, it makes the day to day so much easier. It makes you feel excited to wake up in the morning and like go and make this cool product, or it makes you stay a little bit extra because you really want to put that polish on the game to make sure that that one person that's going to notice it or whatever is really going to get a kick out of it and make their day or something, you know? It's like the small things like that that really just keep me going, at least. And if you have that high morale, you're going to end up continuing to make high quality products. So, and since I didn't mention it here, this will be a bonus tip. Yeah, learn how to do your expected deliveries. I guess the word's slipping me now. Learn how to do estimates. There we go. Yeah, you want to learn how to do good estimates, because if you end up underestimating how long something will take, then they'll try to plan around that. If you say that an entire system will last 3 weeks or something along those lines, they're going to expect, okay, in 3 weeks, maybe the producer's nice and gives you 4 weeks to account for some sort of buffer room or something like that. Or sometimes they take you at your word and they say 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden you realize it's a 6-week project and you're completely screwed. So whenever you have those type of situations, my rule of thumb that some of the more senior engineers gave me is try to multiply by 2 and try to keep on adding for any uncertainties. So if it's a brand new system that you're not familiar with at all, maybe it's something that's super simple, like, hey, we just need you to swap out this text or something. And maybe generally that would take me 5 minutes or something, just as a super simple example. But because it's this type of thing and it's a brand new system and it's something I've never touched before, I'm going to say half an hour. If I finish it in half an hour, well, cool. Now, not only did I get the chance to learn a little bit of the system, I also got the task done, and I'm still within the producer's timeline. So I'm not really losing out on anything. Or let's say something a bit more drastic, which would be something that generally takes like, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours. If you knew the system well and you were comfortable knowing that I just need to change this one thing, you could think of it off the top of your head, and you're saying, okay, it's going to take you like 2 or 3 hours because I need to test some things and whatnot. Okay. I would still go on the high end if it's a new system. Any uncertainty, just try to add extra padding for the estimates, and you're going to love yourself for it. You're going to end up looking a lot better if you finish things a lot sooner, and you're going to end up giving yourself time to be able to write that clean code, to be able to write things that aren't going to provide tech debt and that still give you all of the things that they're looking for. Now, if they start pushing back, because I understand that this is a thing, I think at that point you have to see, and you have to talk to, this is all about the good communication. You have to see what they really want. Like if they want this done right and something that's long-term sustainable, you have to prove your point. And if they want to cut corners and everything, you have to show them the consequences of that, because the code, and maybe this is especially hard, especially coming onto the project and everything. But you have to be able to have a good understanding of, this is going to be unsustainable if you start writing spaghetti code everywhere, and then all of a sudden every task that would have been just 30 minutes if you wrote the system correctly, all of a sudden take an hour. Well, at the end of the day, you're still losing. And a good producer will recognize that, and they'll generally give you your time. And sometimes reality hits and you have to like write some spaghetti code or something, but you have to communicate those things, and tech debt has to be like documented and everything. So small final tip, make sure you could do good estimates, and you're going to thank yourself. Other engineers are going to thank you because you're not writing spaghetti code, and the producers will end up thanking you if you meet all your expectations within a good boundary, even with that cushion. So anyways, I think that's pretty much it for me. I think at this point I'm at the questions mark.
Looks like there's not currently any questions in chat, so we can give it a minute, see if people are curious to hear anything.
Well, nice weather outside.
Yeah, I guess maybe some more will roll in here in a little bit. But yeah, no, I definitely enjoyed the talk. Hearing a lot of really good advice, especially like making sure to get everywhere early, because like that's not really something that you like think about being like super important all the time. But I totally related to that point. Okay, now we're also getting some questions in here too. How does one keep themselves from being exploited by their employer?
I think there's a few different ways you could be exploited by your employer. So I will try to ask for some elaboration there, and then I'll try to point out some ways how you can be exploited. I think one of the big things, especially coming out of ATech, is undervaluing how much you are supposed to get paid. Uh, Understanding what your salary is supposed to be, understanding your self worth, and making sure that you make a case for that. And it's a lot easier whenever they have some experience to go with it, because I was able to prove my case as an intern and come up to a salary that I felt was adequate. Uh, but make sure not to undersell yourself and just be like, hey, I really need this job and this is more money than I'll ever make. Well, yeah, you could think that way, but look at the average salary and you have to ask yourself, where do I lie in terms of just average, I guess, work that you put in? Like, how hard of a worker are you? If you feel like you're going to be on that right side of that bell curve, then you should be shooting for that right side of that bell curve. They're going to shoot a counteroffer and it's going to come down, but at least stay optimistic. And you could always end up doing something like betting on yourself and saying, well, hey, if I ace everything, can I go ahead and get reevaluated in 6 months or a year or something along those lines? And that avoids them being able to exploit you on the salaries initial, I guess, expectation there. And then exploiting you as far as just working you for hours on end or something like that. That's a tougher one. I think that one's going to require as well good communication. I've been fortunate enough to have really good leadership above me that tries to help prevent that as much as possible. I would say those estimates are really going to help if you really tell somebody that it's going to take 3 weeks and they try to get it in 3 days or something like that. You have to tell them like that's physically impossible and like that's not going to happen. Or you're going to have a really, really shitty version of the system that's going to take a lot of time to be able to add up or to like add on to in the future. And if your entire company's like economy model is based off of this, then you want to make sure that the system is done well. Like you don't want to undersell your logic. As long as it's sound logic, I'm not going to say don't say you don't want to do something because you don't want to do something. That's just being lazy. But like give a proper reason, and it's going to be a lot easier to convince them because really you're just trying to. You have to make sure that they being whoever you're talking to, producer or lead or whatever, right, project manager, that they understand that you're on the same team. I also want to make this high quality product. I also want this to be super successful. But I believe in order for it to be super successful, we're going to need to be able to allocate a little bit more time to it. Otherwise, it's just not going to be fully complete. And sometimes that takes having to give some pushback to the publisher or someone that maybe even over them. But I think it's about that proper understanding of the problem. And once they properly understand it, it's a lot easier to be able to, I guess, get a more fair end result.
So I guess by extension, would that mean that you would also recommend walking away from certain opportunities if you feel like you don't see eye to eye with people?
I think everybody's line in the sand is going to be different, and if you feel like you're being constantly disrespected at your company and you feel like you're in a toxic work environment, I highly encourage people to leave those situations. It's not good on you mentally. It's not good for your self-worth. It's not good overall. You have to be able to be at a company that you enjoy being at. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you enjoy it every single day because, I don't know, you just really love every single little thing about the company. It's just that, are they doing everything that's within a good what you define as a good moral boundary. Are they exploiting their people? Are they exploiting their workers and making them work crazy hours? Are they making them come in on weekends or something like that whenever without any prior notice or anything, right? Or like what are they doing and why do you find it wrong? These are the like introspective questions that you should be asking yourself, and it's really hard to judge on a case by case basis. But walking away isn't always the wrong solution. It just kind of depends. And I wish I could answer that better, but there's so many different scenarios that it's really a case by case basis. Just make sure you have a good understanding of what you want.
Absolutely. I think that's some really good advice.
Mhm.
We've got one person who wants to know if you have any, like, I guess, general tips for breaking into the industry, like how to land that first interview or internship.
Yeah. So going back a few slides to the recipe for success, it's going to be a lot about doing exactly what you're doing now. This is partially just like putting yourself out there a little bit more. You're listening to my talk now. You're listening to some of the advice I have. Something may stick, and if that sticks, well, hopefully that'll help you that much more. But the socializing aspect cannot be undervalued whatsoever. Putting yourself out there a little bit more, trying these experimental features. You're going to have to apply unless you get a recommendation somewhere. And whenever you apply, just constantly having the introspection to constantly improve that and make your entire portfolio better, your resumes better. I'd say there's two primary methods if you're just doing applications somewhere to be able to get a job. There's the like tailor-made application for every single job where you think about every little thing, and that has maybe a higher likelihood of getting you hired with that job, but it's going to end up requiring more time that you invest into that. And so you could also go with another method of just like spitfiring a whole bunch of applications everywhere with just like a pretty solid chunk, and those take you a little bit of time. I think it just depends, and I think a good mix is what I would recommend. Like looking at companies that have a good work history, that have things that you want to work on, and sending in those quality applications, but still sending in and understanding that you have little to no experience, and sending out a whole bunch of applications to be able to cast a wider net is going to help, as well as continuous iteration, because especially given the times right now, it may not be the easiest to find a job right now. So you may need to send applications again in a couple months or something whenever the economy starts picking back up, hopefully. So keep that in mind and make sure that you don't get discouraged and that you're constantly trying to improve. And sometimes you could even try to create opportunities for yourself. Maybe you try to dedicate, I don't know, 10, 20 hours a week or whatever you could feel is feasible to creating some independent ventures that may help you. Like, I don't know, creating a YouTube channel or something that may put your name out there a little bit more, or sharing it on game dev forums or Reddit or whatever it may be. Just increasing your exposure that way and increasing your experience that way as well. And whenever that opportunity finally does land on your lap, you'll be much more prepared because of all those things. So hopefully that answers that.
Yeah. So, kind of with that, do you have any general portfolio tips for like what you think makes a good software engineering portfolio?
Yeah, so I've heard a few different things on this. So I outright asked my lead whenever they were considering me as an intern, why me? Like, there was plenty of candidates, I'm sure. And there were for the internship position, and there were whenever I was trying to hop over to be a salary employee. And it's because I just went out of my way to go do other things. I didn't have to do some of these group projects that I put myself into. I didn't have to do some of the game jams that I put out there. And I didn't have to like go dive into this experimental feature or something like that. Like, these are all things that aren't like your run of the mill portfolio, right? Most people are going to be really impressed whenever they see, oh, wow, you went ahead and messed with this super random feature, or you went and did this super abstract thing. And not only that, you did it well, right? You have a complete mastery. And whenever you get to the interview and being able to talk on that thoroughly is going to speak volumes to you. And so for the portfolio, I guess to rein that back in, really showing off that diversity is something that really helps, as well as something that I've seen a lot of people see is they look at your GitHub activity and they look at just like your general activity and see how you do on a day-to-day basis. If you have more of those green boxes checked, you're probably going to end up having a better time convincing people that you're passionate about programming and everything. So constantly trying to get on and do something related to programming. I wouldn't say if you can every day, go for it. Like, by all means, some people have the time to do that. That's awesome. Please, I encourage as much as possible because it's just going to help your chances. And it's going to help your exposure, experience, all that stuff. It's just going to accelerate you. But at least the majority of the days in the week, at the very bare minimum. And at least that, keep pushing it forward, keep on being involved, do proactive things to be able to show people who you are. Because if you're somebody worth hiring, you're somebody that's passionate, you're somebody that knows what they're talking about, you're somebody that likes to learn things, you're trying out things all the time. Because those are just the things that you're going to have on a day-to-day basis. They're going to want you to go try out this new system and, hey, tell me how it works and how's this feel, and cool, go ahead and learn this entire system that this guy left because he's no longer at the company or something. Cool, now I have to pick that up or something. So yeah, good breadth of knowledge. And then one of the things that another senior engineer, so these are now from 2 senior engineers being passed on to you guys, another senior engineer said to have kind of like a T-shaped, I guess, depth of knowledge, where you have a good idea of a lot of things, but you have a lot stacked in really highly on what you want to specialize in, to give it kind of like that T-shape. And digging really deeply into those and being able to talk at length on something will be really impressive and show that you're not just your everyday Joe, I guess. So you're going to be able to express a deep technical understanding of everything. And I know I kind of brushed over a lot of the hard skills here. I'm not saying that not having good understandings of data structures and that's really the biggest thing that comes to mind. And I don't know, the way that general pipelines work or something. Like, having those things is great, and making sure that you could speak to them thoroughly is even more important. And in a portfolio, if you could just show that you know what you're talking about, whether it be just going a little bit further in your explanation whenever you're showing off your project or something, or whether it be giving that explanation on your GitHub. I think you give like an explanation on each like commit or something. I'm not exactly sure how I did it there, but you should be able to provide some context there. Things that just help them understand that you are a good engineer and you're a good hire. And the less doubt in their mind that you give them, the better. And so that should be the ultimate goal for your portfolio. Have it be that whenever they enter your portfolio, they're impressed. By the time they leave, there's not a doubt in their mind that you know how to program and you know how to program well, and that whatever they're looking for, if it's I have room to grow and I could definitely learn all these things and all these systems, well, then cater it to that. Or if you just want to show that you have a very large breadth of knowledge, well, then show all that stuff off. Just kind of depends, I guess. So that's where you get into like tailor making your portfolio and your resume towards each individual job. But yeah.
So I'm kind of curious. Do you think there's any like one thing that you could point to that like really set you apart as a good candidate, or do you think that you kind of broke into the industry because you made yourself much more well-rounded?
The phrase that stuck out to me was that I had all of the key, I guess, like key factors that make a good candidate. Like, I had all the intangibles that they're looking for in a software engineer. Because I was very curious. I was like, really, me? What made you guys pick me, right? I'm really interested. And I had this in a candid conversation with my lead whenever he brought all this up. And it was just doing all the right things, which is that the whole presentation, and you guys feel free to here, like, I'll go back really quick in this like recipe to success thing, and in this intern to salary page, like actively practicing all of these things. Like, I would go out and socialize as much as possible and like talk to people, and whenever they needed volunteers for things, I'd volunteer. And that's not because I wanted to get the job, because I just wanted to be myself, and it kind of like coincided. I'm like, hey, this is me. Like, I want to show you guys as much as me as possible. Like, I have some good traits, I promise. And trying to show that off. And I guess that would be the biggest thing, because there's 2 phases to that. There's the actually getting the opportunity to get the internship, which is in the whole recipe to success, and how you get there by having a good community and being able to socialize and creating a proper network that's going to be able to give you opportunities potentially, or at least give you a good reputation to help your chances of an opportunity. And having the good introspection, all that stuff, right, to be able to culminate into a higher likelihood of you getting an application. And then the intern salary, increasing your likelihood that you're going to be a standout intern that's very likely to be hired. It's hard for them to say no. That was my biggest thing. I wanted to make it so if they told me that I wasn't going to be in a full-time position, that they felt bad. That was my entire like goal, I guess, for that. Like I was like, I'm either going to get the job here or I'm going to make such a good impression and I'm going to get so much experience from all the improvement that I had that I'm going to go somewhere else and I'm just going to kill it. Right? Like I was very optimistic with the way that I was thinking, but that's because you kind of have to be. If you start bringing yourself down and feel like you're not worth it, or you may just like chip away at your chances of success. So yeah, maybe a bit of arrogance sprinkled.
I think that's absolutely some really good advice. That's like a really good mindset to have, like for the day in and day out of everything, so it doesn't like you don't get too bogged down with it. So we got one person that's curious. Would you recommend like doing a double degree between ATech and CS for those of us who want to be software engineers, or do you think that like an ATech degree and a CS minor would be adequate, or how do you kind of feel about that relationship?
I see. That was something I even asked myself because I took the CS minor rather than the CS major. I felt like I could do the rest individually. Yeah, I think it depends on how you're motivated and how you learn. It's hard for me to be able to answer that question without knowing you personally. Having a CS minor, I understood after looking at the rest of the classes that I could definitely close that gap individually with self-taught learning. I've done plenty of things individually. I learned plenty of languages individually. I did so many different experiments, and that's thanks to ATech, really. That like gave me the opportunity to like go out and learn things individually and not feel afraid of failing and just like go throw myself out there, right? That fearlessness came from ATech, I felt like, to go get the rest of it. Now, the minor, I think, gave me a really strong foundation. That's not to say that the major would not provide any benefit. I feel like there's definitely things that I don't necessarily fully understand because I didn't get the major. So I could definitely see that being very beneficial to some people. I think it just depends on what you're going for and how technical you want to be whenever you get into your first job. I don't know. I have some weird opinions on this. I think it definitely depends on the person. I don't want to necessarily draw a line in the sand and say this is absolutely the best decision. Sometimes doing a double major is right for some people. Sometimes a major and minor is right for others. For me, it felt like a major and minor was right. I feel like I could definitely go back and potentially get a master's degree, but I didn't want to do that until I felt like I had some experience and something to offer whenever I went back to get my master's, and then I had a better idea of what the master's would even provide for me. And once I got some experience, once I saw some other people get masters, etc. So, yeah, unfortunately, kind of a non-answer there. Let me see if I could provide any other clarity.
No, I think that's good. It's hard to like know sometimes, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, the course load is like different between the two. They have some of the same classes, but like the overall extent of what you gain is pretty different.
I will say this, nothing's going to outweigh you putting in the work. And if you end up you could easily go out of your way and go look up nearly all the classes informations that you have and have that available online. Like they have, I can't remember the YouTuber's name off the top of my head, but he's created like a full-on CS degree just available through YouTube videos. And it's not necessarily his, it's just like available through MIT or available through whatever it may be. So the resources are out there. It's about, do you need the structure? And it's not really a knock on anybody if you do, but do you need the structure to be able to properly learn these things? So, do you need to have somebody tell you that you need to do these things in order to be able to properly learn them? Or are you fine doing it individually? So yeah, there's a lot of resources out there. It's getting easier and easier every year to be able to just hop on over. And there's even some people, I believe I have a coworker that didn't even go to college. He just went straight to being a game developer, threw himself into as much experience as possible. And he's still a pretty bright guy. But yeah, I digress, I guess. Kind of depends.
Yeah, I definitely kind of get the sense that it's more important to like prove yourself to an employer than it is to just say I have a degree.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, okay, cool. So moving on, we have someone that is curious if there's anything specific that you did to kind of get your name out, aside from just going to like club-related meetings and talks. If there's any sort of like networking tips or whatever that you could give.
I say it's all the little things. I think people notice all the little things a lot more than you expect. Like, I got a recommendation uh, to go to another job outside of BossFight based off of my reputation of working. And I got through the interview process and everything. And ultimately, I decided to work with BossFight and everything. And that's great. I don't regret it. But like my reputation was, I didn't ask for anything. I didn't say, hey, do you have any job openings or something that you know of? They just realized that I was potentially going to be out of work. They like my work ethic a lot. And this has been the case for me on nearly every job that I've had the opportunity to work at. It's showing through doing and then also putting yourself out there, as in like, I'm not going to say I don't think I was popular whenever I went to ATEC or anything, but I think I had enough of a reputation where people would generally associate me with being a good to decent engineer. And hopefully that's not arrogant to say, and somebody will call me out on it if not. But I think that reputation definitely precedes you. Like, professor said it a lot as I was going through ATEC, and I definitely feel like it's all the more relevant looking back. If you end up putting in good work and you consistently end up doing things that people want from a teammate, and you can just ask yourself what you would want from a teammate, then you're going to end up getting a really good reputation. That's going to end up opening more doors for you, even doors that you're not necessarily even looking for sometimes. Sometimes people just reach out to see if you want to work with them or something. So going to the meetings, going to the talks is a great thing. You also have to put yourself out there, because if you're just a passive participator, then you're going to want to be a bit more active, and you got to be a little bit fearless. You can't. Nothing's going to come to you if you just kind of sit and passively participate in everything, but you're not actively voicing your opinions, and voice them respectively, but make sure that you also see why you're wrong whenever you are wrong. And that's where the introspection comes into play and everything. So go to these events. It's really helpful. Go to game jams. You put yourself out there. You make some funny jokes. You meet some people. You socialize, all that fun stuff. It's going to help. But also, you can't get away from your reputation. If your reputation is someone that cuts corners and slacks and everything, it's going to be a lot harder for people to want to recommend you, even if they like you as a person. If you start making really bad decisions whenever you work on a team project with other people, people are going to remember that. And it makes it so much harder for them to be like, you know what, I'm going to put my neck out there and say that this guy is going to be the person that I want to recommend. People aren't going to tell you when they skip over you in a recommendation. So make sure that you don't give them a reason to. So make sure you're doing your best whenever it comes to any team project. Don't ever throw anybody under the bus or anything like that. Your reputation is everything.
Absolutely. Cool. So we have one more question. This one's like pretty straightforward. I don't know if you've kept track, but do you know how many game jams that you've done?
Not any. I actually haven't done that many in a structured environment. Remember the whole like, I kind of like flopped for a bit. Yeah, this whole photo. Yeah. So whenever I came back, I was already like a junior at that point, and then by that time, I think I went to maybe a handful of game jams. Yeah. So it wasn't really a crazy amount or anything. It was just trying really hard whenever I could. On top of that, if you guys remember, I was working near full time a lot of these times, so it was really hard to make time for a lot of these things. So a lot of my game jam experience was just like creating new features and let me go mess with this thing, and oh, this homework that I got, oh, that's cool. Well, let me go mess with it some more and see what I really want to get from it. I did take a new perspective, and whenever I realized that my time was a bit shorter, and rather than doing homework assignments for the grade, because if you guys are paying attention here, my GPA wasn't the best at a certain point in college. I started taking assignments as in, what do I want to get from this assignment? I understand I need to meet with the teacher once or the professor once, but what do I really want to get out of this? Do I really want to learn something, or do I just really want to get that quick A? And to me, I always went for the former, where I was really trying to learn something out of everything that I did. And that included game jams. And that means if I have to replay the video 2 or 3 times, if I really need to understand whatever the hell they're saying or how they're doing it or what logic they're following, I do that. And I really I took the approach of quality over quantity because I didn't have the time to be able to go to as many game jams and opportunities like that. Instead, I just tried to really hunker down and get the most out of what I could with just some homeworks and whatever projects I jumped onto or any videos that I saw, and making sure that I keep those on repeat. And another thing to kind of accelerate that, I highly recommend like if you guys have a long commute or anything, this is my trick. I always try to do some sort of podcast or audiobook or something to be able to supplement that learning, because that's a whole bunch of downtime that you guys could be using to further yourselves. So yeah, I guess not many. To go back to the question, not many game jams. Just a whole bunch of thorough work, I'd say.
Yeah, I think the only downside to that is that given the pandemic, there's not a whole lot of long commute times anymore. But
that's very true. I will do it whenever you're doing something monotonous, I'd say.
Yeah, for sure.
Or cooking, cleaning, whatever it may be. It's a good way to be able to for me at least, kind of unwind and also kind of gain some new information and still feel productive, like doubly. So, yeah.
We've got another question. Did you learn the extra CS things you know through game development, or by specifically seeking out like CS free elective courses, like those MIT ones that you talked about? Or do you have any insight on like which is better?
Yeah, I did listen through some of those courses. I even took notes for a couple of them. I'm sure I could like dig up a couple notebooks on some random like CS courses, but there were a lot of theoretical things that didn't necessarily stick with me, or they didn't come to mind whenever I was really trying to solve these problems. The data algorithm stuff was very useful, but I took that at UTD as well, and that's where my primary knowledge comes from. I'd say the biggest thing is that I got a lot of exposure, and all this exposure is really nice because I could at least try to look that up if I ever need it. So the exposure generally comes from just, again, diving into as many things as you can. Where did I put it? Probably here. Yeah, that fearless thing. Diving into as many things as you can, really just exposing yourself to as many computer science concepts as you possibly can. And whenever you feel like that subject comes up, this is what I do at least. For example, I felt like I was really weak in networking, and rather than trying to shy away from networking, I went ahead and tried to I tried to get the networking internship, which ended up panning out, but that's not necessarily something that's feasible for everybody. So I took a networking class at UTD that I needed, and it was between like automata theory and networking for my final CS credit, I believe. And I really wanted to do automata theory, but I was like, you know what, I'm really weak in networking. I don't have a great understanding of that, so let me dive into that and let me get some good exposure there. And not only that, let me reinforce it by looking up some videos on like what is networking and how do all these things work together on top of the like class itself. So it's getting as much exposure as possible, really establishing that top part of the T, and then from there, going through and seeing what you're weak in and fleshing that out. Make sure, maybe you don't have to be an expert in whatever you're weak in, but you need to be good at it. Like one thing I will say, I started off as being pretty weak, I'd say, in UI UX whenever I first started off at BossFight, and I'd say now it's one of my strong suits, and I enjoy it for the most part because I'm so comfortable with it now. But a lot of that came from watching a whole bunch of videos. I don't think there's very much that was relevant from what ATEC taught me regarding UI UX and Unity, because it's really hard to go really specific and niche with this one small thing that may be relevant to some of the class. So those deeper understandings on almost any subject matter were generally gained through independent research, whether it be forum, just diving through and reading through every single forum I can and everyone that touches the subject and testing it out myself if I need to, or watching some videos on some people that are smarter than me and know how to do things and whatnot, and understanding it that way. So yeah, I guess breadth of knowledge and then digging down deep is how I generally try to establish myself. And any insight on which would be better? For me, I think I want to say that's like the best solution at large, because especially nowadays you can look up so much information so easily. It's better to know more or know about more to be able to increase your utility belt, I guess, and then be able to dive deeper as you need it. Um, but I guess at the end of the day, if you're going for a job that's super niche, maybe you only do networking or something, and it's not really going to help you if you know about the UI UX side of things. If you're just going to be a server side engineer or something, so it's a little bit situational, but I would generally uh, recommend people to go with the process that I've used, with going wide and digging deep on the things that, especially you're weak in, but making sure that you know them well and making sure you don't have very many weak points.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, could you speak a little bit to like how active you were in Game Lab, and did you find that beneficial?
Yeah, I was the co-lead there. I'd say I was very active both semesters. The first semester, so I took 2 semesters of Game Lab, and then after that, I think I graduated, or yeah, I graduated that semester. The first semester, I was co-lead creative director on both. But the first one, I took more of a primary role in the game design side of things, and I didn't feel like I was having enough influence in where I wanted to go, which is more the programming side of things. So I really shifted gears and went all out on programming. I think I was very involved on both sides. On the game design side of things, I tried to give some structure on how some of the game design documents worked. These are all without the professor asking or anything. This is me trying to make sure my team succeeded as much as possible, trying to establish the game design way ahead of any of the programmer stuff, providing all sorts of examples to try to make that communication as seamless as possible. So I tried to give them visuals, give them a diagram of exactly how it should work, give them an idea of how the AI would work with some of the enemies and stuff like that. All that stuff to like reduce however much I can the miscommunication, because I understood if there was miscommunication with the game design, then they would end up having some problems with the engineering, and then having to repair those problems is going to end up taking more time. So I did whatever I could to be able to do that. And then on the programming side of things, for the second semester, I think I also went. I think I did more even the second semester at this point. I think we really wanted to have a good idea of. I think I really wanted to try to unify all of the programmers at that point. So I tried to give them some idea of how the entire repository structure was going to work, how we were going to try to do programming so it's easier if everybody's on the same page. If you guys establish programming patterns and general, I want to say it's nomenclature of how like you want to put everything. So how you want to write your private variables, how you want to do, I don't know, your functions, and how you want to abbreviate everything, and how you generally should be doing all the small things. I went ahead and did a big presentation on that. That was all in my free time. That wasn't part of what was required. And then on top of that, also refactoring some of the code to make it easier and continuously. That's one big thing that I participate in actively is clean code thing. Where are you? There you are. Clean code is not only what you write, it's also what you read and what you can improve, and making that also clean code. So whenever I had the opportunity to, if I found a system that just felt weird to read or it felt like inefficient, and I do this even now, I try to rewrite it and make it so how would I want to read this and what makes more sense. And I'm not faulting whoever did this before. I'm just improving on the product, and maybe somebody can improve on mine in the future. I actively encourage it. But writing clean code is going to end up making it more beneficial for you to be able to have a good reputation with your fellow engineers. So that was another thing. I tried to make sure that people understood as much as possible. It's really that communication thing and doing as much as you can on your part. There is a certain threshold where after a certain point, you can't really do the entirety of the project. So you just try to make it as easy as possible for everybody else. And I try to be proactive with that and saying, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I even say maybe it's complicated. I understand. Feel free to ask me about anything, and I could help you out. Message me through Discord or send me a text message or something, right? Whatever friction I could reduce for them, I try to reduce to make it easier for them to just work on the project. So, yeah.
So
were they beneficial? Yes, very, very beneficial. Sorry, I want to make sure I answer every question thoroughly, hopefully. And were they beneficial? Yes, it was very, very beneficial. I think having that mindset and also working in a team environment is irreplaceable. It is absolutely something that made the transition over to actually working in the industry so much easier. I was able to actually effectively communicate with my peers. I was able to understand and empathize. Empathy is a huge thing for some reason, where I understand whenever game design doesn't turn out originally the way that you intended to. So there's a lot of pivoting that needs to happen. And there's some frustration that could come over from that on the engineering side of things, because you're constantly having to change the system that you're so proud of and you put on a pedestal, and then you have to tear it down and then rearrange it to make this new system that the game designer has. And it's so easy, I feel to spite the person that had you tear it down. But really, if you take a step back and you have the empathy, you can see on the other side of the aisle, they're really just trying to make a really good game, and that's going to end up making your code look better, really. So bear with them and always try to keep in mind that you're on the same team. So yeah, absolutely did help.
So I wanted to take a second and ask, for your ATech projects, the ones that weren't very programming focused, were you able to kind of put your own spin on those in a way that you could use to your advantage for learning about software engineering?
I'm not sure I can think of very many examples. Let me see if I could. I guess I'll ask and see after pitching this first example. So, in Game Design 1, I actually thought writing the rules for a tabletop game is very similar to programming. Would that qualify for what you're asking?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, yeah. So this is actually something I could even take a step back and show you guys a little bit more on. So whenever I was working as an associate manager at, it doesn't matter, I would actively need to encourage my employees to be able to perform better, right? And part of that is aligning their goal with your goal. And my goal at that time was sales. So I had to align, how can I make it so they believe that them being a better salesman is going to align with them being further along in their career. So you could actually find a lot of relevancy in almost anything that you do towards what you want to get towards. For me, let's say programming. Programming is all about efficiency and that introspection and constantly refining and making sure that you're doing things in the most efficient manner and doing things concisely, ideally, and still with high clarity. It's kind of a weird mixed bag, but the efficiency thing was something that I obsessed on for so long. Once I was doing the data structures class, I would have to do stocking of the entire store's inventory or something, I can't remember. And I figured out the most efficient method to be able to reduce the amounts of overhead of just me walking to be able to create a more efficient algorithm to be able to stock everything. So that's one example there in just a day-to-day life. And then whenever I was taking Game Design 1, I was thinking of the rules that we were having to create and adding a spin of this is like programming. The rules, you're essentially explaining to somebody that you have to assume is a dumb robot, which is your computer essentially, with very strict, explicit instructions of exactly what you want them to do in order to get the achieved result. It was like pseudocode, really. So I thought of things in that perspective, and it made it so, again, that whole quality of time thing, really trying to push my effectiveness as much as possible. I would do this for everything. What's the most effective morning routine? What's the most effective transportation route? What's the most effective schedule at large? Do I want to go to the gym before? No, because then I have to go back home, take a shower, and then I have to drive off again. Let me instead do it after work, and then I could end up taking a shower and going home and just enjoying the rest of my day or something along those lines, right? So I don't have those redundancies. And once you start spotting them in your everyday life, you'll start spotting them in your code. So you could transfer those skills over. Something that's super simple would be that whole communication thing that I was talking about. If you feel like you're ever in some sort of disagreement, it's generally because of some sort of miscommunication. I've realized that most people aren't bad people. You really just didn't communicate something correctly, or they didn't communicate something correctly. So you generally try to take a step back and understand where the miscommunication happened and make sure that you don't take it as anything. I try to treat most problems, especially with close people, that like close relationships, friends, family, etc., with it's us versus the problem, not me and you, and that's the problem, because then you end up having a much easier time just doing anything in life. And if you have that perspective whenever you talk to a producer or a game designer or something like that, you're going to end up having much healthier relationships overall, and you're going to have much more productive conversations that way. And you're not going to be at ends, and you're going to end up having some really good, fun times.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely sounds like the programming mindset and everything just transfers to a lot of areas, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, cool. Programming's all analysis, and something that's overlooked, communication. It's very much communication. You're communicating to another engineer.
Yeah, so we got one more question here. Have you witnessed any like stress casualties so far? And like how well do you think your current work environment handles discussions about work stress?
I have been very lucky. Let me go ahead and boast about BossFight for a second, because they deserve it based off of how well they've handled this entire transition and how they've handled crunch at large. They very rarely have ever required me to crunch, and there are some times wherever we just have to get it done, and sometimes it's inconvenient and it kind of sucks. But you know what? It's definitely a lot less than a lot of companies, and they've been so nice to us, honestly, that I appreciate them a lot. Whenever it comes to these things. So personally, I haven't seen any at my job. I definitely started seeing whenever things are starting to get really close and certain deadlines. Yeah, it's starting to get stressful. I even started working, like, I'm pretty sure there's a week where I worked like consistently, like maybe 60 hours or so, which is definitely on the right side of that bell curve for my average number of hours worked. So it definitely was wearing on me, but they didn't ask it of me. So that was something I wanted to do because I was passionate about the project. I wanted to make sure it came together as well as possible. And I wanted to build team morale, like nothing brings down team morale in my mind like a buggy game where you're just like, well, this looks like a shit show. I've been working on this for like 3 months or 6 months or whatever, and half of it works or something. It's like, well, that sucks. But if they see a nice, clean, polished game and like day after day, I felt like that's how I could have contributed, especially since I was still relatively new. I wanted to establish myself. So I didn't think I was a casualty of it, but my girlfriend definitely reeled me in and was like, hey, you need to make sure you keep your mental health in check and try not to push it, because hitting a wall is very real, and a lot of people burn out within the first couple years or months of being a game developer. So you want to make sure you pace yourself correctly. And that's back to the one of the earlier questions, I believe, where you want to make sure you respect yourself. And if the company isn't respecting you and they're asking you to work insane hours or whatever it is, you need to understand what your line in the sand is. And if you feel like, I can't consistently do this, I've already talked to them, they keep on doing it anyways, then it may be time to look for a different job. And you have to have that conversation with yourself if you get into that situation. It's not an easy conversation to have. Another part of that is potentially talking to the people above you and communicating your discomforts. I know that they'd appreciate it, but sometimes they can't do anything about it. And sometimes that's life, and you have to move on and find something that's a better fit for you. Nothing is more unproductive than an unhappy employee, I will say. So it's generally in the company's best interest, whether they know it or not, to have you be happy. And I think that's the take that BossFight has, and I very much appreciate it, and I've tried to be as productive as I can in my time there. So, unfortunately, haven't witnessed any stress casualties, and yeah, BossFight handles it very well.
So how similar was your experience as just an intern? Was there like ever any expectation of you to like ever need to stay late just as an intern, or is it only like a more serious situation, working there full time?
I think there's maybe I could probably count on a hand the number of times that they've asked us to actually like work through lunch, work late, work on like a weekend, and a very very rare occasion. And as an intern, never. Like we were first off, we were hourly, so it doesn't benefit them to like have us uh, continue working past our 40 hours or whatever. But almost every time that I've stayed late has been because I wanted to stay late. And that's just me trying to either tie off the code in an appropriate spot, make sure I leave in a good impression, make sure I'm ahead of my schedule, whatever it may be. But that also goes back to I feel I would be a lot more stressed because I definitely was near the beginning of my term at BossFight because I didn't know how to estimate. So that goes back to that hidden tip that I want to tell you guys about. Learning how to estimate is going to prevent a lot of that stress and make it so you're not pushing yourself to meet the ludicrous expectations that your arrogant, naive, past self put you in, where you're like, yeah, I could write that in 3 days, and then day 3 comes and you're like halfway done. Yeah, it's not fun for anybody.
Did like your estimations change like so drastically? Once you started doing development full time, did you keep using your like college estimations of like, oh, I can only even put in like an hour or two a day to work on this? Was that hard to adjust when you had more time to devote to the project in general?
Yeah, that was definitely the biggest thing. I was thinking like, oh, in a game jam, I do this in a couple hours or something, or hey, for homework, I have done this in a couple hours or whatever. Right? That shouldn't take me a day. Yeah, famous last words. And so generally, once try to pad yourself again, you still want to learn the systems. You're not going to be productive if you just keep on taking shortcuts and putting bandages over problems and just slapping on solutions and not really understanding how they fit holistically, because you're going to make inefficient code at that point, and then the inefficient code is going to end up just leading to slow code, and then you're going to have to take a day or a week or whatever to try to clean all that up eventually. So it doesn't really save you any time. It's really just making you look better that week or something. And it ends up creating a lot of tech debt, and tech debt is not ever fun to be in. So yeah, that's generally how that went. It was definitely bad expectations based off of working individually, as well as you just have a different cadence whenever you're at work, right? Like you go to lunch generally around the same time. You generally have some meetings you got to go to. There's still the overhead of like having to talk to other designers and whatnot. This is all like kind of like bureaucracy, right? Like there's a lot of small overheads that you just don't think about initially. And sometimes it's even with the project itself. Maybe just to like compile it, it takes a long time or something. Something that's like completely out of your control, and you just kind of have to go with it, right? Or maybe you're cutting it so close. I've had this happen. You're cutting it so close to the deadline that producers keep constantly asking you how things are going, and because you have to keep constantly responding, you're starting and stopping. That you end up slowing yourself down, and it ends up being like counterproductive after a point. So yeah.
Yeah, totally understandable. All right. Well, it looks like questions are kind of slowing down just a little bit. I think we probably got this, one more that we can ask here really quick before we start to wrap up. Someone just in general is kind of wanting to know what games you play.
I play 2 types primarily, I'd say, maybe even 3. I'm big into competitive games. Whenever I have the time for it, whenever I have enough free time and whatnot to be able to do so, I love being able to just play some really cool competitive games. I was really big into Overwatch a couple years ago. That kind of died down, and we'll see if Overwatch 2 fixes some of the issues that I had with it. I've tried League out a bit. I like playing that. I like the social aspect of games, so I like to be able to play with friends. So I've gravitated towards a lot of like MMOs where you could still be competitive and still play with friends, which is nice. So I still play WoW from time to time. Right now they're ramping up for their new expansion, so that's nice. And then I really love big cerebral games where you could just really dissect things and play with them that way. So TFT is fun. I like it. It's very dynamic, and it's kind of like a roguelike in the sense that like you have to start up and keep going every time. A very interesting perspective that a game designer taught me on TFT and League. And it's able to create all these different combinations. So I really like being able to break apart those like mechanics and see how I could really push them forward. And I think TFT does that very well. Teamfight Tactics, by the way, just in case. And Hearthstone was another really fun one. I stopped playing that one as well. Just a bit of an overhead to like start up a game. Sometimes it was like a slower meta, and so the games would take a bit longer. And just building up your collection. So I started tapering away from Hearthstone and going towards more TFT. I generally try to socialize a lot whenever I play games. Sometimes I don't get the opportunity to hang out with, especially now during COVID. I haven't had the opportunity to hang out with as many friends as I'd like. So I try to play more social games. And sometimes I try to incorporate playing games with my significant other. That's nice. You know, we hang out, play some games. So it kind of kills like 2 birds, 1 stone type thing, right? So that's nice. And we just have a great time. So yeah, I guess general competitive games, cerebral like strategy games, and that's about it. Single player games and stuff like that. For some reason, they just don't stick to me. I can't seem to like consistently like really enjoy them. I think it's because in my mind, I've seen these stories so many times, and I don't know, they get kind of old. Like I know how the story is going to end. The gameplay is going to be kind of the same. Like sometimes you see some really cool things, but that's not really my cup of tea. That's not to say I don't enjoy certain types of single player games. It's just more like a dessert for me, where it's like once every couple months or something like that, I'll sit down and play an individual single player game. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, with that, I guess we can go ahead and start wrapping up for the night. Did you have like your socials anywhere that you wanted to share?
Yeah. Oop. Forget, we're not at the end. Right. So contact information. Yeah. Wanted to go ahead and give a big thanks for having me, guys. It's still relatively early in my career, so I understand I may not have all the stripes on the wall like some of these other people may have. But I felt like I still had something to offer, and I wanted to make sure that for anybody in a similar position, feel free to reach out to me. Feel free if you guys have any questions. I wasn't really able to go through any examples or anything, but if you guys have problems or anything, feel free to shoot them my way. I'll do my best to try to respond to them. I'm in a pretty busy situation right now, but I'll do my best. Like the other part, by the way, I need to make sure to highlight. That's pretty much everything. Like if you just look up ENRQRDZ, you'll generally find my Twitter, Instagram, my LinkedIn. Everything has that like extension on it. The LinkedIn doesn't have the @ I think it's just like linkedin.com/ENRQRDZ. And I did have my Discord as the same thing, but I don't like people even having the remote idea of my real name whenever I'm playing in a random server or something. So I stick to my gamer tag. So yeah, feel free to reach out. Email, Discord, LinkedIn message, whatever you guys like. I generally try to respond. And if you guys need help, I'll do my best to try to provide the best advice I can. So yeah, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for giving the talk. We really appreciate it. I know you listed your Discord on there, but if anyone else is like trying to track you down, he's also in the SGDA Discord server. If you want to look for him there. But yeah, I will quickly remind everybody tonight. T-shirt sales are closing down at midnight. So if you haven't ordered one already, now's the kind of time to get that in. And then also, yeah, again, next week on Wednesday on the SGDA Discord server, our Vice President, Andrew Sylvester, will be hosting an Intro to Unity workshop. So definitely keep in touch, everybody. We will see you next week. Thank you so much.